Hi, it's Dan here with managingdigital.com. Welcome back. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the question, this IT for IT thing, what is it good for? What if I told you you could cut 20% of your annual license and maintenance costs out of any medium to large IT infrastructure and IT tooling environment, or tooling you use to manage the IT flow of work? Many big companies have done this using the IT for IT reference architecture as a template. As you can see in the diagram, the IT for IT standard defines a number of what we call functional components. Those are the things in the blue boxes. One reason that I chose IT for IT as the way that I wanted to understand and talk about this problem in my last job in a very, very large company is that when I showed this picture to senior executives in the IT suite, they looked at it and said, "Oh, I understand that. I own this box and this box. And this box, the blue boxes are functions. The black circles and orange circles are data. And they're what we call data objects in IT for IT. Lines connecting the data are foundational, essential integrations that allow you to get end-to-end transparency and control of your IT landscape. That's not the only thing we're interested in. We're also interested in, within each of these functions, which represent organizations and most IT divisions and IT departments that have grown up over time into things that have a lot of tooling with them, we can look at each one of those. And this has been done very successfully by large consulting companies, including me, by people inside their own companies, to say, what are we actually spending money on just when it comes to software? When the IT for IT standard was new, HP Software did a lot of this work. They would go into their clients and they would put the picture like this, the earlier version of this picture, up on a big screen, and they would say to assembled managers and VPs and directors in the IT function, tell me about the software you use to do this function. Let's just write them all down, count them up. You can do that with sticky notes. You can do it on a Miro board. But let's take a look at how many different licensed software products do we use, for example, to perform the test function or to perform the monitoring function. How does that actually work in your company? Their experience was, and this surprised me when I first heard it, in a typical client of theirs 10 years ago in a typical IT department, they would find a minimum of 7 or 8,000 licensed IT products just mapping to these blue boxes. 8,000, 10,000, 12,000 products that were in use. The reason for that is substantially that these blue boxes typically represent organizational units where someone has permission to try to optimize that silo. And you may have heard the word silo when we're talking about, help me with my IT. What about these silos? Well, that's what the black lines are about, but we'll do that in the next video. But if we just talk about the silo and optimizing the silo, if I give you permission to spend money on software to make that silo better, what will happen is you will, over time, acquire lots of pieces of software. And they won't integrate very well, so you'll acquire other pieces of software to integrate those. Some of those don't quite cover all the data you need to keep track of, so you get some other software to do that. Usually it will be some kind of a tool that you learned about in your tribal conference that you go to. Maybe it's just a lot of complicated stuff in Excel, which is probably even worse. Or it could be software that you wrote yourself, which is even worse than that. And you get all of this stuff in production in a big company. Nobody understands the big picture. And maintaining the integrations with other silos that you need in order to actually scale up an automated modern IT environment is missing. So how do we do this? It's really pretty simple. And it is enterprise architecture work. And the IT for IT model is fundamentally a reference architecture from my perspective, because that's how I've used it, that an enterprise architect or someone with an enterprise architect mindset can use to say, let's look at the big picture. Let's talk about how everything fits together, and let's talk about what we need. So if we drill into one of these functional components, perhaps it's testing, perhaps it is monitoring, perhaps it is portfolio management, whatever it may be, we can get from the IT for IT standard a list of specific functional criteria that that function ought to do. We can also supplement that with information from COBIT and to some extent from ITIL about what are the functions that should happen around that silo and what are the processes that should be there. Another thing we'll talk about in another video is how to test your environment for particular silos or groups of silos for whether these functions are in place, how well they're automated, how well they're integrated. That's another question. But for our purposes today, we'll just talk about how do we do the functions inside the silo using the IT for IT standard as a template. And that gives us the criteria that we need to say, let's talk about these functions. Tell me what tools you have that do these functions. We can very quickly build up a map, and sometimes it's a many-to-many map because you will have tools that do more than one function, and you will certainly have functions that use more than one tool. When we get that picture and we say, how do we do source control, which is about code management, it's Git, if you like, or something like it, however you may do that. Let's look at what we actually have helping us with that. Do we need all of that? Should we standardize all of that? This is more important than it was before because of the proliferation of DevOps tool chains invented by small teams. We know of a company that is a large bank where more than 200 DevOps tool chains are in production because small teams, and I can map what they've done against this model I'm showing you, the small teams have chosen software to automate their DevOps tool chains, their DevOps pipelines, their code development materials, tools that they use, testing, all of that. And they have a whole set of very small, unique tool chains. That don't scale, my friends. It's impossible. We need to draw a line between what the innovative, smart people in those dev teams should be able to choose for themselves and what we really should provide them as a utility that they can use. That's also what we talk about in our TOGAF training, which is that the role of an architect in an empowered team is to help that team understand the context well enough so that they can make use of reusable infrastructure, reusable plumbing, standard ways of doing things, and to help them understand why they need to focus their innovative energy on doing something that's actually new instead of going out and buying something that's almost the same thing as 30 things that we already have. We can use this model to help understand that problem. It's been done very successfully. 10 to 20% of the software licenses and of the software maintenance charges that companies are paying can routinely and have been routinely stripped out of the IT cost ledger by taking the approach that I'm talking about here. Besides saving those initial costs, which everybody likes and everybody understands, the other thing that it does, which is less obvious, but also is a tremendous cost saver and efficiency driver, is it reduces the number of interfaces that we have to build, which was the original purpose of the IT for IT standard, was to do something about integration chaos among tools that do these different functions. That is still a problem. We haven't solved that problem. We are looking at it in the IT for IT forum for what to do next. What to do next could be, are there points of integration here that are standard enough problems that we should define a much more detailed API? For example, for sharing incident data between you and your supplier. And that's more critical now because of cloud outsourcing, or sharing observability data in a coherent way between you and your cloud platforms and your suppliers and your partners. All of that has to start with a conceptual model that says, this is how all these things fit together. That's what IT for IT is for. If you'd like to know more about that, visit me again here. If you'd like to understand the IT for IT approach of managing all this stuff, sign up for my IT for IT foundation training. I'll tell you about it there, and you get a certificate, which is useful. If you'd like to understand more about how enterprise architecture works, and specifically how to consume this kind of thing and turn it into roadmaps that add value to your company, sign up for my TOGAF practitioner training, which will also lead you to a nice certificate and a badge. And if you would just like to talk more about this, schedule a meeting. We can do that too. So until next time, thank you very much. I'll talk to you again soon.